I need you to listen to me very carefully, because what I'm about to share is not something I learned in church. It's something I learned on the other side when I was deep in witchcraft, rituals, and spiritual monitoring assignments. There are certain dates the occult circles mark quietly, dates that never make the news, nights that look ordinary on the calendar but are spiritually charged with activity. And January 20 is one of them. When I was still practicing, January 20 wasn't celebrated openly. It was whispered about, prepared for, watched closely. We didn't call it a holiday. We called it a transfer night, a moment when authority shifts, doors are tested, and spiritual permissions are either reinforced or broken. And most people sleep through it completely unaware. I remember the first time I was assigned to observe a January 20 night. We weren't casting spells in the traditional sense. We were watching patterns who became restless, who suddenly felt heavy, who experienced unexplained conflict, loss, or anxiety. We believed that if someone was spiritually unguarded on that night, certain things could legally attach and follow them for months. Now, hear me clearly, I'm not saying January 20 has power by itself. Dates don't have power. Agreement does. And the occult thrives on moments when masses of people are emotionally distracted, spiritually passive, and mentally unfocused. What breaks my heart is this: many believers feel the effects of this night without ever knowing why. Sudden arguments, financial pressure appearing out of nowhere, a strange heaviness in prayer, sleep disturbances, a sense that something shifted, but they can't explain it. I didn't leave witchcraft to stay silent. I came out to warn you, because once you understand how these nights operate, fear loses its grip and authority returns to where it belongs. January 20 is not random. In occult structures, it represents a threshold date, a symbolic doorway tied to leadership transitions, spoken declarations, and collective focus. The enemy watches moments when words are spoken over nations, families, and futures, because words create spiritual movement. In witchcraft, we were trained to observe times when people unknowingly come into agreement with anxiety, fear, anger, or hopelessness. January 20 often carries emotional intensity, expectations, uncertainty, comparison, and worry about the future. That emotional charge is what the enemy feeds on. Let me explain something most churches never teach. Spirits look for permission, not power. They cannot force entry. They wait for openings created through fear, bitterness, exhaustion, and careless words. On nights like January 20, monitoring spirits are sent to observe households, not to attack, but to record. To see who is spiritually asleep, who has no covering in prayer, who is speaking negative declarations over their year, who is unknowingly opening doors by agreement. That's why people often say, I don't know why things started going wrong around that time. It's not superstition. It's spiritual timing mixed with human vulnerability. But here's the truth the enemy hates. Believers who are aware are untouchable. Awareness shuts doors. Authority cancels assignments. If you've ever experienced sudden unease around this time of year, you're not imagining it. During my years in the occult, these were the signs we were trained to look for after January 2008. Unusual exhaustion with no physical cause. Sudden tension between spouses or family members. Sharp financial stress right after feeling stable. Heavy dreams or disrupted sleep. Loss of motivation toward prayer or purpose. These weren't coincidences. They were indicators of spiritual resistance attempting to settle. But listen to me, pressure does not mean possession. Pressure means something tried and failed to find rest. The enemy presses where he senses authority is forming. If you're feeling resistance, it's often because you're growing, not because you're weak. This may surprise you, but there was one thing we feared more than prayers shouted loudly: quiet believers who understood authority. We were taught to retreat when people fasted, covered their homes, spoke scripture calmly, and refused to agree with fear, especially on spiritually active nights like January 20. The enemy cannot override spiritual alignment. He cannot stay where peace rules. He cannot argue with truth spoken in faith. That's why this warning isn't meant to scare you. It's meant to position you. You don't need candles. You don't need rituals. You don't need special objects. Here's what actually shuts doors. Guard your words, especially about your future. Pray with authority, not panic. Anoint your home simply, dedicating it to God. Refuse fear-based media consumption that night. Declare scripture aloud, even briefly. One sincere prayer carries more authority than hours of occult activity. I'm sharing this because silence helps the enemy, but truth liberates people. January 20 does not belong to darkness. It never did. The enemy only borrows moments until light enters. If you're hearing this message, you are already ahead, already covered, already protected. Don't fear the night. Command it. I stand here today not as an ex, which glorifying darkness, but as someone who escaped it and knows its limits. January 20 is only dangerous to those who don't know who they are. You are not spiritually homeless. You are not unprotected. You are not unaware anymore. Stand firm. Pray calmly. Rest confidently. And remember this: light doesn't react to darkness. Darkness retreats from light. Welcome to the restoration path.